Luke stood in line, waiting for the Visari sergeant who would introduce the cadets of various species to the Galactic Army, when he overheard the two aliens in front of him boasting about surviving Earth's predators as they waited. The recruitment center was overflowing with nervous energy as beings from across the galaxy shuffled through the processing queues.
I tell you, the pincher nearly took my arm clean off,
the Sunir was saying, his voice a melodious trill that the universal translator rendered into accented English. The reptilian stood at Luke's height, his green scales shimmering. His thick tail, easily as long as he was tall, had wrapped around his waist 3 times like a living belt. The tip tucked neatly beneath one of the coils. When he continued his tale about the pincher, his forked tongue flicked out to taste the air, and his vertical pupils dilated with the memory of fear.
The beast was like our ancient text described the Devi. All teeth and fury, with jaws that never stopped biting.
The other alien, a Muitsar, made a dismissive sound that came out like air being squeezed from a balloon. Where the Sunir were all scales, the Muitsar stood rigid and angular, a humanoid form covered in skin the color of deep purple twilight.
A dog,
the Muitsar scoffed, his lipless mouth barely moving as he spoke.
Those are terrifying, yes, but they're domesticated creatures. When I visit Earth for my cultural exchange, I encountered true Deathworld predators, the crows.
He shuddered, his head ridges darkening to almost black.
I made the mistake of striking one that swooped at my meal. Within moments, I was swarmed by an entire murder of these terrifying Deathworlder creatures. They remembered my face for the entire 3 weeks I remained on the planet.
Luke felt his jaw clench as he listened to their increasingly ridiculous boasting.
The creature may have appeared harmless,
the Sunir insisted, his tail unwinding slightly in his agitation.
but when it reared up on its hind legs and showed those massive front teeth, teeth designed for gnawing to the hardest vegetation on that death world, I knew I faced a formidable foe. Its eyes were red as blood, and it made this terrible thumping sound with its rear appendages.
The Muitsar nodded sagely, his ridges tense in what must have been his species' equivalent of sympathy.
I believe you, Thirex. I too encountered one of their smaller predators. A rooster, they called it. The beast strutted about on legs ending in terrible talons. And when I inadvertently entered its territory, it flew at me with a cry that could freeze blood. Its wings beat with such fury, and those burrs.
He shuddered again.
I barely escaped with my dignity intact.
Luke's hands had balled into fists now. These two had visited Earth, his Earth, and were making it sound like they'd barely survived a petting zoo. And these two were acting like they'd survived Jurassic Park because they'd met Thumper and Foghorn Leghorn. He glanced around, checking for any sign of the Visari sergeant. Everything was good. No sign of anyone with sergeant stripes heading their way. A grin spread across Luke's face. The kind of grin his sister used to say meant someone was about to learn a lesson they wouldn't forget. Military bearing be damned. He loosened his shoulders, let his parade rest stance dissolve into something more casual, more farm boy at the county fair. Before either alien could react, he'd thrown his arms around their shoulders, pulling them into an impromptu huddle. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Sunir's tail unwound completely, whipping around like a startled cat's. His scales flushing a pale yellow-green that Luke guessed was fear. The Muitsar went rigid, his crossed arms tightening so much that Luke heard something pop. Hopefully just a joint and not anything important. Both aliens' eyes, or in the Muitsar's case, the trio of optical organs arranged in a triangle on his face, went wide with terror.
"Hey there, friends," Luke said cheerfully,
his grip firm but not painful. "Name's Luke Patterson from Earth, specifically the Great Plains region of the North American continent. Pleased to meet fellow survivors of my homeworld's fauna."
That is it.
The Sunir stammered, his translator struggling with the rapid-fire squeaks of his alarm.
You moved so quickly, we didn't hear.
"Thirax, right?" Luke interrupted smoothly. "And so you must be..."
Quirval.
The Muitsar managed, his voice higher-pitched than before.
Of the Muitsar's collective third sphere. You're touching us. Humans touch strangers.
"Oh, we're not strangers," Luke said with a laugh that he made sure showed plenty of teeth. "We're all galactic army now, right? Brothers in arms. And brothers share stories. Especially stories about surviving Earth's predators. Because, and I mean this with all the respect in the world, you two met the friendly ones." The silence that followed was profound. Around them, the bustling of the recruitment center continued, but in their little bubble of space, it was as if time had stopped.
The friendly ones?
Thirax finally whispered. Luke nodded sagely, finally releasing them from his grip, but staying close enough that they couldn't easily back away. "Oh yeah, dogs? Domesticated for thousands of years. Most of them would lick you to death before they bite. Crows? Smart as hell, sure, but they do hold grudges. They're more of an annoyance than a threat, right? And rabbits. My little sister used to keep them as pets. The thumping is how they communicate. They're prey animals. They're not predators. Oh, and roosters... Yeah, okay, well, roosters can be jerks, but they're about as dangerous as an angry toddler with a stick.
But they attacked us,
Quirval protested weakly. Did they, though? Luke asked, raising an eyebrow. Or did they defend themselves when you got too close? You see, the thing about Earth fauna, even our prey animals, well, they're tough as nails because they evolved alongside the real predators. You want to know what actually kills people on Earth? Both aliens nodded, seeming mesmerized despite their obvious fear. Luke had to admit he was enjoying himself. Bees, he said simply.
Bees?
Thirax echoed, confused. Little flying insects, about this big. Luke held up his thumb and forefinger about an inch apart. They make honey, right? Sweet stuff, really delicious. They seem harmless. But here's the thing. They're social creatures. You attack one, you might get 100 coming after you. And when they sting, they inject venom. And for most humans, it's quite painful. But some of us are allergic. That tiny little sting can cause our throats to close up, our bodies to go into shock. We can die in minutes without medical intervention. More humans die from bee stings each year than from all other large predator attacks combined. Quirval's optical organs were practically bulging out of his head.
But they're so small.
Exactly, Luke said, warming to his theme. That's Earth for you. It's not the big obvious threats that get you.
That is impossible.
Thirax breathed, but Luke could see he believed every word. And those are just the insects. Luke continued, really getting into the rhythm now. You want to hear about the real predators? The ones that make dogs look like stuffed toys? I knew a Sunir once. Came to Earth about 5 years ago as part of a diplomatic mission. Decided that he wanted to see the real wilderness, not just the cities. So we went camping in Alaska. Luke paused for dramatic effect, noting how both aliens leaned in despite themselves. He found what was left of him 3 days later. Bears got him. Grizzly bear, to be specific. 3 meters tall where it stands on its hind legs. Claws like knives. Can run faster than a ground vehicle in short bursts. The Sunir had stored his food in his tent, right? Big mistake.
3 meters?
Thirax's tail was wrapping around his body again. Tighter this time.
Oh, that's nothing,
Luke said casually. You ever hear of polar bears? Even bigger? And they actively hunt humans when they're hungry enough.
Please,
Craval said, his voice barely above a whisper.
Tell us more. We need to know. For safety purposes.
Luke almost felt bad for them. Almost. He went on, painting a vivid picture of Earth's deadliest inhabitants. It told them about inland taipans, about African elephants that killed more people annually than most predators, about hippos, herbivores that could kill. With each revelation, Thirax and Craval seemed to shrink further into themselves. Their initial boasting had completely evaporated, replaced by terror. And don't even get me started on the plants, Luke added. Manchineel trees with fruit that can kill you, and sap that causes severe burns. Giant hogweed that... What in the void is going on in here? The booming voice cut through Luke's narrative like a plasma blade. All 3 of them snapped to attention, or tried to. Luke managed a passable parade rest. Thirax's tail got tangled in his legs and he nearly fell over. Craval's arms were still crossed, but he'd gone so rigid he looked like a purple statue. The Vizari sergeant had arrived. She stood 2.5 meters tall, covered in short green fur that bristled with irritation. Her 4 arms were placed on her hips in a gesture that was universally recognizable as, "You're in trouble now." Her face was vaguely feline, with large eyes that seemed to see everything and approve of nothing. "Cadets Patterson, Thirax, and Craval," she growled, somehow knowing all their names without being told. "Would any of you care to explain why you're socializing like this is a cocktail party, instead of maintaining proper military bearing while awaiting introduction?" "Sergeant, Luke began. "Did I ask you to speak, Cadet Patterson?" Her eyes narrowed. "I've been watching you 3 for the last 5 minutes. Hugging? Storytelling? Is this how you think the Galactic Army operates?" "No, Sergeant!" all 3 responded in unison. "I should hope not." She looked over them with obvious disdain. "You'll have plenty of time to swap your little stories in the barracks. Right now, you're going to get back in formation and pretend like you have some semblance of military discipline. Move!" They scrambled to comply, Luke taking his place behind the 2 aliens who were now standing at what they probably thought was attention. Luke suppressed a grin as the sergeant stared at him. And as the sergeant droned on about regulations and expectations, Luke found himself looking forward to the barrack conversations to come. Maybe he'd tell them about Australian wildlife next time, or venomous snakes. Or maybe he'd be nice and tell them about the actually friendly Earth animals. Maybe.